Yo, what's going on, y'all? It's Cone, and today I want to talk for a little bit about the Cleveland Cavaliers, who are currently sitting at the top of the Eastern Conference. In fact, they're at the top of the NBA with an undefeated record of 7-0, joining OKC as the only teams that don't have an L on the record book so far. And they got their 7th win in a very impressive way. They're facing off against the Bucks last night in Milwaukee, which doesn't sound that crazy because the Bucks have been bad up until this point, but they're also desperate. They're playing at home, they're 1-4, they desperately need a win to try and swing this season around. And they got ridiculous performances, probably the best two performances of the year from their top two guys. 34, 16, and 9 from Giannis, 41 with 10 threes from Dame, including 9 dimes, and a huge, tough mid-range jumper to put the Bucks up 1 at home with just a few seconds left. The crowd was behind him. It felt like the momentum had swung their way and that the Bucks were going to get out of this finally with some type of convincing win, break this losing streak. But on the other end, Cleveland just continues to find ways to get it done. Donovan Mitchell hits an even tougher mid-range jumper over the outstretched arms of Gary Trent Jr. to sink this one. 0.3 seconds left. Cavs go up 1. Bucks don't get a shot off, and Cleveland's got their best start in franchise history, or best start since 1976, almost towards the beginning of this team's existence. It's extremely impressive, and they've had some easy games to begin their year, like the Raptors, the Pistons, and the Wizards, but they blew all those teams out, and they've got some impressive wins along the way too, like the Knicks at Madison Square Garden. They blew out the Lakers, who had an amazing start to the season. They beat the Magic. The Cavs have been getting it done in pretty much any way you could ask for if you're a Cavs fan or someone who just wants to see if this team is legit. Up until this point, there has been nothing to tell me that they are not one of the best teams in the entire NBA. And it's extremely interesting that this is all happening after an offseason with so many question marks. Of course, there was the question of if Donovan Mitchell was going to extend with the franchise, because it felt like ever since he got traded to Cleveland, most of the major media outlets were just ticking off the days until that date when he would have to decide, am I going to re-up with Cleveland for the long term or say no, I want to play out the rest of my contract. And eventually, people were anticipating he might ask for a trade or that the Cavs would be forced to deal him to make sure he didn't leave for nothing. But Spidey said, I've seen enough. We won a playoff series. I like the talent around me. I feel like I can win here in Cleveland. And he signed with the team long term, which is a big win for small markets and proved a lot of those media outlets wrong. But then there was the question mark of if Darius Garland was going to be there for the long term alongside him, because an article came out soon after the Cavs lost in the playoffs that basically said that if Donovan Mitchell was going to stay, Garland was probably going to want to be traded, that his representation wasn't happy with the way the dynamic is working in the backcourt. But seemingly they patched this up in the background, or it really wasn't that much of an issue because Garland stayed. There was really never any serious rumors about him being traded. Then there's the question mark of if Jarrett Allen and Evan Mobley were going to continue on as the front court going forward, because they've both had amazing moments, and Allen was coming off the best season of his career. I would say Mobley is an amazing young talent, but there have just been issues with them clicking together, so it felt like if they traded Allen, that would be understandable, but they didn't do that. They pretty much kept everything the same, and they did make one major change, which was firing JB Bickerstaff and bringing in Kenny Atkinson. There were a ton of reports in kind of that same article about Darius Garland that basically said that JB Bickerstaff lost the locker room, that it wasn't working, and that he was pretty much on his way out, and we saw that happen, and Kenny Atkinson came in seemingly with a plan. The Cavaliers front office went out there and they wanted to find a coach who could maximize the talent here. They didn't want to have to make any big moves. They wanted to make this thing work because on paper it is a very talented roster with 4 guys who legitimately have all-star level play at their ceilings. And so far, it's working. The big thing that's changed with this year's Cavs team is the offense. Because in the past, it was a lot of Donovan Mitchell, please save us. Just asking him to isolate. And Donovan Mitchell is one of the best scorers in the league, one of the best scorers I've ever watched with my 2 eyes. He can make some magical things happen, but you don't want him to have to go out there and score 30 points per game, 70 points some nights just to get you a W. You would much rather he's out there scoring like 25 and a lot more guys are involved to make it a much more versatile offense. That was a big issue they ran into back in 2023 when they faced off against the Knicks and they really fell apart, because if Donovan Mitchell wasn't making things happen, nobody was. And last year it was better, but this year it is light years ahead of what it's been in the past. Now, Mitchell is still leading the way with 24.4 points, 2.7 rebounds, and 4.3 assists on 50% shooting and 40% from deep. He's still insane. He is the guy for this team, and that's not surprising whatsoever. When you have one of the best scorers in the league, he has the ball the most, but it's much more balanced as opposed to it, again, just being Donovan Mitchell iso ball heavy. like Darius Garland, who we talked about there being the trade rumors around, is looking a lot more like himself to start this year, because the past couple of seasons, it's been a very injury-riddled mess for Darius Garland, especially last year. I don't know if I've ever seen somebody get hit in the face and get random facial injuries the way that Garland does, but he was really in and out of his rhythm. It was a pretty poor season from him last year, and right now he's putting up 18 points per game and 6.3 assists, shooting 50% from the field and 40% from deep. He looks like the Darius Garland that we saw in the All-Star game, and I've always been a big fan of his game. I'm a believer. I believe this would be a bounce-back season, and he's doing exactly that, and him and Mitchell have had a really good cohesion to their game. It feels like they're way more in sync than usual. I like the way Kenny Atkinson is running the rotations and letting one of them be on the court with one of the bigs, and they're just cooking in those duos. And then, of course, in the starting lineup and the closing lineup, they're all together, but it's working. It feels synergistic. It actually feels like they're cooperating as guards rather than just like, hey, you go handle the ball, I'll do it now, you're out of the game, I'll cook. It feels like they're actually working together. And something that's really contributing to that is the growth of Evan Mobley, who I've always said is the X factor. I've been a big fan of his. I believe I have a video out there from like when he was first drafted, or just leading into the draft, saying that he could be the next Anthony Davis. I was a big believer from day one and still have continued to be, and he's showing why I've been a believer right now. At the moment, being used in a different way, being empowered to be a ball handler, being told to be more aggressive, he's putting up a career high 17.7 points per game, 56% shooting from the field, and 41.7% from three on just under 2 attempts per game. He's spacing a bit more. He's being actually allowed to make things happen as, like I said, the ball handler. And he specifically said, Kenny Atkinson told him, be more aggressive, attack. We need you to be that guy for us to get anywhere. And a lot of that is having him bring the ball up the court. Right now, I saw in an article, I believe it was from The Athletic, he's on pace to set a career high for times bringing the ball down the court in a season by December. So he's being used way, way more. He's being used as a hub. They're giving him the ball early in actions to create, to run pick and rolls, to pass out of the high post. Mobley is being allowed to be a way more versatile offensive player. He's being used more as a weapon rather than a last resort, and it's been big for him. He is the key to the Cavaliers going from, hey, they're a fun playoff team that can win a series, to a legitimate threat in the Eastern Conference. And then Jarrett Allen is still a walking double-double, 15.2 points per game, 11 boards, 1.7 blocks, shooting 76% from the field right now. He's a lob threat. He's a good screener. He's great when you get him the ball in the middle of the floor, finding open players. He's just looking a lot like himself from last year, where he did have the best season of his career. So the big four are all cooking, and it's looking great. They're all cooperating well. They're playing off of each other. It's the most cohesive I think this Cavs big four has ever looked. But it's not just them. It's also Karis LeVert dropping 12 points and 4.3 dimes off the bench, shooting currently 61.5% from the field and 52% from three. That's obviously going to come down, but the efficiency is really promising. Ty Jerome, who of course is a Thunder legend. He went to UVA, which is a school I was at. I watched him win a national championship, so I've really been rooting for him throughout his career, and at the moment, he's found a home. He's been a really solid bench guy for the Cavs, currently putting up 9.9 points per game on really efficient shooting as that backup ball handler. Dean Wade has been really solid as a starter with Max Strus not out there playing the year, giving them a lot of really good defensive minutes. Sam Merrill, still a sniper, but also handling the ball a bit more. George Niang, still good off the bench. Isaac Okoro just had a really good game with 13 points against the Bucks off the bench. Everybody's contributing so far. Kenny Atkinson has really gotten everybody involved to buy into the system, and especially to do more than they've previously done. More guys are handling the ball, are setting screens, are involved in actions. It feels, I think I keep saying this, or at least it feels like I keep saying this, they're just a lot more fluid. And this has all led to a top 2 offensive rating, which in tandem with their usual really good defense, which right now is 4th in the NBA, makes them pretty much unstoppable. And that defense is kind of just what it's been in the past. You're getting dominant interior play from Evan Mobley and Jarrett Allen, 2 mobile bigs who are going to block shots, who can switch on the perimeter, who can give anybody on the opposing team a really difficult time scoring. You've also got the fact that they force a lot of turnovers so far this season. They're 5th in the league in opponent turnovers per game. They're getting in passing lanes. They're really poking the ball away a lot. That's big. I mean, I watch a lot of Thunder basketball, of course, being a Thunder fan. It reminds me of them sometimes where they're just frustrating and flustering the opposing team whenever they have the ball. They are just pesky and annoying to play against on both ends, which is really good. It's fun to watch Cavs basketball right now. I've had a ton of fun seeing them go out there and dominate the NBA so far. And at this moment, they look like the clear number 2 in the East right now. I don't think anybody's going to argue that the Celtics are number 1, even though their record is worse. They're a juggernaut. They're the reigning NBA champions. Even Cavs fans, I don't imagine, will argue that. But behind them, why can't it be the Cavs who are the biggest challenger? The Knicks have been a bit up and down out of the gate. I still do trust them to be really good by the time the playoffs roll around, but right now it's been a little shaky. The Sixers are not healthy, and who knows how often Embiid and Paul George will will be out there on the court. The Bucks, as we've talked about a lot in this channel, are struggling. The Cavs are putting it all together. They look great on both ends, top 5 offense and defense. They've got high-level talent, guys that are taking strides, a coach who they're really buying into the system of. The Cavs feel good, and this is all also without Max Strus, who is one of their important role players. He has not played at all to start the season, but when he comes back, he's going to be a big addition. It just feels like this Cavs team is currently constructed is starting to find its real potential, and I made a video going to last season thinking that that might be the year where the Cavs really put it together. I said they could be a 2 seed. If they really clicked, they could potentially be a 1 seed and really a threat if Mobley took a jump, and they continue to build off what they'd shown in the past, but it just didn't end up happening. And a lot of that was injuries. The Cavs were decimated by injuries last year, especially to their top guys. Garland, like I mentioned earlier, constantly getting hit in the face. He was really in and out of the line. Mobley, same thing. Donovan Mitchell didn't even play enough games last year to qualify for All-NBA when he 100% would have been on one of those teams if he did play enough. So they were decimated by injuries, and they still found a way to win a playoff series. They still had a very interesting matchup against the Celtics in the second round, even if they weren't dealing with some injuries to guys that weren't going to beat the Celtics. But they gave them some interesting games. So yeah, I was excited for the Cavs coming to the season, but they are definitely outperforming my expectations. Now the question is this going to hold, or is this just early season magic? Because we've seen it a lot of times in the past where a team will way overperform at the beginning of the year and drop off a cliff. I always think about the Jazz from a few years ago where they looked really, really good to start the season and then ended up towards the bottom of the standings. Now, this Cavs team is way more talented than that Jazz team was, but still, you have to ask, are they going to be a top 1, 2, or 3 seed in the Eastern Conference? I don't know for sure, but I feel decent in saying that they can absolutely do that. Like I said, last year they were one of the better teams in the East. They were top 4 seed despite all the injuries. Some of their competitors look a bit shaky, and I feel like the current model, the current system that they have in place is pretty sustainable. Coming up in their next 10 games, I feel like we'll get some answers. There's a lot of very winnable games, like they face off against the Nets and the Bulls twice, the Hornets, the Pelicans twice, but they can be scrappy sometimes. It's honestly a game-to-game basis thing with New Orleans. But also over that 10-game stretch, they play the Bucks. Again, that's their next game, is a rematch against Milwaukee, who you know is going to be more desperate than ever to get that win. It's really hard to beat a team that has Giannis and Dame twice in a row, so we'll see how that looks. So that's a test. The Warriors, who have looked amazing to start the season, especially defensively. If Steph Curry's back for that game, which I hope he is, that'll be a massive test. The Sixers, by the time they play them, I would imagine Embiid and Paul George are playing, so that'll be a big battle. And then they've got the Celtics in Boston towards the end of their 10-game stretch, who is the only team I can comfortably say right now is better than the Cavaliers. That'll be a real matchup. If the Cavs can go into Boston and get a win against that red-hot team, then I don't think anybody's going to have a choice but to say that the Cavaliers are legitimate and could be a real threat in the Eastern Conference. And I hope that's the case. I want to see this small market team get rewarded for trading for a guy like Donovan Mitchell, taking a risk when everybody thought, oh, there's no way he stays, and then he signs the extension. They've got one of my favorite young players in the league, Evan Mobley, a guy I've been rooting for in Darius Garland, and Jarrett Allen, who the Nets threw away when they put together that Kyrie Irving, Kevin Durant tandem, as well as eventually James Harden with that big 3. It's a group of guys that I want to see succeed and go out there and hoop. I like Kenny Atkinson as a coach. I felt like he got thrown away by the Nets, and I'm sure Cavs fans are really enjoying this. I haven't seen enough people talk about the Cavaliers up until this point, despite them being 7-0, so I had to make a full video. But let me know what you think about the Cavs right now. Do you think this is sustainable? Are they actually one of the best teams in the East? Is it just kind of a hot streak at the beginning of the season? And are they the team that could compete with the Boston Celtics? Do you think this is a real championship contending team over here in Cleveland? If I had to pick right now, I would say I'm just a little bit hesitant because I want to see more than a 7-game sample size, but for sure an Eastern Conference Finals threat, I would go with that absolutely. But yeah, I appreciate you watching. Leave a like and subscribe if you enjoy. Hit the notification bell so you don't miss out on future videos. Like I said, let me know what you think about the Cavaliers. Where do you think they land in the standings throughout the season? How do you feel about your favorite team up until this point now that we've gotten a near 10-game sample size? I appreciate y'all. I'll see y'all later. Real one, say it back.